One actor on this set turned down a $4 million contract renewal and walked away without a second thought. That single decision tells you almost everything about how strange, and how lucrative, the business behind MASH really was. For 11 seasons, the fictional 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital sat behind enemy lines in Korea, but the real battles were being fought in conference rooms at 20th Century Fox, where contracts were rewritten, salaries were renegotiated, and a handful of actors quietly built fortunes that outlasted the war they were portraying by decades. Television historian David S. Rice, who wrote the definitive 1980 Chronicle MASH, the exclusive inside story of TV's most popular show, spent months embedded with the cast and crew, and what he documented was a production caught between artistic ambition and network economics. Today we are going behind that curtain, tracing exactly how the actors of the 4077th arrived on set, what they earned across the run, and where their lives and finances landed afterward. It helps to remember the environment these actors were negotiating within. Television salaries in the early 1970s were nothing like the multimillion-dollar per episode deals stars command today, and syndication, the practice of licensing reruns to local stations for decades after a show's original broadcast, was still an evolving revenue stream that studios controlled tightly. Actors without strong representation or leverage often signed contracts that locked them into modest rates for years, while those who understood the system, or hired lawyers who did, found ways to renegotiate as the show's popularity grew. MASH became one of the most watched programs in American television history, and that popularity gave its cast increasing bargaining power season after season, which is exactly why the financial arc of nearly every actor on this list bends sharply upward the longer they stayed. Start with Jeff Maxwell, who played the perpetually inept mess hall cook Igor Straminsky. Maxwell was a young comic performer with almost nothing saved when he joined the production, and he understood early that a recurring background role would never make him rich on its own. So he worked the margins, taking on extra duties around the set to stretch his income, and by the time the series ended his combined earnings had grown into a respectable six-figure sum for a performer never billed above the title. He later turned his fictional culinary disasters into a real cookbook trading on the joke, and by his later years he had settled into a modest, comfortable retirement built on smart, patient management of a career that was never destined for headline money. Kelly Nakahara joined as a background nurse whose character kept shifting names because the writers barely bothered to track her, yet she appeared in well over 100 episodes while receiving credit for a fraction of them, a common industry practice at the time that limited residual payouts for performers without series regular status. She used her set downtime productively, painting watercolors that decorated the production, and outside the show she built a genuine career as a visual artist. Her per-episode rate climbed steadily across the years, and by the time she left acting behind for painting and brand work with companies like IBM, she had assembled an estate that, by the time of her passing in 2020, was estimated in the 8 figures, a testament to disciplined investing far beyond her television paycheck. David Ogden Stiers arrived later, in the show's 6th season, bringing a trained Broadway voice to the aristocratic Major Charles Winchester. Stiers was already an accomplished stage performer with a modest nest egg when he joined, but he quietly kept a significant part of his life private throughout the run, protecting a lucrative parallel career in voiceover work that would later make him one of the most recognizable narrators in animation. His per-episode fee rose sharply through the final seasons, and back-end syndication arrangements pushed his total earnings from the show into the millions. He went on to conduct orchestras and lend his voice to Disney classics, leaving behind a multi-million-dollar legacy when he passed in 2018. Larry Linville, trained at London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, played the endlessly ridiculed Major Frank Burns, and he built real affection among his co-stars despite his character being despised by fans. His contract, negotiated early in the show's run, was structured in a way that limited his long-term syndication upside, and after 5 seasons he chose to leave rather than renew, a decision that cost him future residual income but freed him from a character he felt had run its course. His episode rate had climbed into 5 figures by his exit, and he continued working steadily in television and theater until his death in 2000, leaving a multi-million-dollar estate built as much on discipline as on his MASH earnings. McLean Stevenson's departure remains one of the most talked-about exits in television history. As the easygoing Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, Stevenson grew frustrated playing second fiddle to Alan Alda's expanding creative control, and he pushed for release after 3 seasons. Producers wrote his character's death into the finale of that arc without warning audiences in advance, and the backlash was immediate and enormous. Stevenson later admitted publicly, in interviews reflecting on his career, that leaving the show ranked among his biggest professional regrets, since the sitcoms he pursued afterward never matched MASH's success. Still, his separation settlement was substantial, and combined with his salary it left him financially secure until his death in 1996. Wayne Rogers, who played the sharp-witted trapper John McIntyre, was arguably the shrewdest businessman of the ensemble. Frustrated at being cast permanently as a secondary character, he left after 3 seasons, and when the studio attempted to pursue legal action over his exit, the case collapsed because of a contractual technicality that left him free of obligation. That freedom mattered enormously, because Rogers went on to become a genuinely successful financial professional on Wall Street, serving on corporate boards and managing investments with the same discipline he'd shown in his contract dispute. By the time of his death in 2015, his fortune, built far more on his post-acting finance career than on his television salary, was estimated in the tens of millions. William Christopher's father Mulcahy was the show's quiet moral center, and Christopher's own life carried a poignant subplot. A serious illness during the show's run threatened his job security, and Alan Alda, by several published accounts, advocated for writing the storyline into the show so Christopher could retain the medical coverage his family needed. Christopher stayed with the production through its full run, his per-episode fee rising substantially by the finale, and he later invested wisely in real estate while continuing character work, leaving behind a multimillion-dollar legacy when he passed in 2016. Jamie Farr's Corporal Klinger began as a one-day background gag and grew into one of the show's most beloved fixtures. Farr leaned on his own genuine military service to bring authenticity to the role, and as the character's popularity soared, his negotiating leverage grew with it. He later asked writers to phase out Klinger's dresses as his children faced bullying at school, a decision that reshaped the character without diminishing his popularity. By the series' end, his earnings had grown dramatically through salary increases and back-end deals, and he has continued performing well into his later years, maintaining a comfortable multimillion-dollar net worth. Gary Berghoff, who originated Radar O'Reilly, brought real vulnerability to the role, partly informed by a physical condition he carefully concealed on camera. His time on the show was also marked by documented friction with castmates, and exhaustion eventually led him to walk away during the 8th season, turning down a lucrative renewal offer in the process. His earnings from his run were still considerable thanks to syndication, and afterward he built a second career as a respected wildlife painter, a path that, combined with his television royalties, secured him a comfortable retirement. Mike Farrell, who joined as Captain B.J. Honeycutt, chronicled much of his experience in his memoir, Just Call Me Mike, A Journey to Actor and Activist. Farrell was known for pushing back against material he found ethically troubling, and he became an outspoken advocate on and off set. His salary rose steadily across his seasons, supplemented by directing and writing credits, and he later co-founded a production company behind films including Patch Adams. Between smart property investment and continued royalties, Farrell has maintained a multimillion-dollar net worth into his later years. Harry Morgan arrived as Colonel Sherman Potter, already a seasoned character actor with decades of Hollywood credits behind him, having appeared as a different character earlier in the series before taking command permanently. His salary climbed into some of the highest figures on the cast by the finale, bolstered by syndication and residual arrangements that reflected his tenure. Morgan continued working steadily afterward, including on the spin-off Aftermath, and by his death in 2011 at age 96, he had built one of the largest fortunes among the ensemble. Loretta Swit fought for years to reshape Major Margaret Houlihan from a one-dimensional foil into a fully realized officer, publicly objecting to the nickname Hot Lips as demeaning to a military professional. CBS refused to release her for other opportunities, including a chance to headline Cagney and Lacey, keeping her locked into the show through its entire run. Her per-episode rate rose enormously across more than 200 episodes, and afterward she returned to Broadway, launched a jewelry line, sold her own watercolor paintings, and funded animal welfare advocacy through her Sweetheart Animal Alliance. She passed away in 2025, leaving behind a multimillion-dollar estate. And then there is Alan Alda, whose creative fingerprints are on nearly every corner of the series. Alda insisted, as a condition of signing on, that the show maintain at least one operating room scene per episode to preserve its anti-war message, a demand he detailed in his own memoir, Never Have Your Dog Stuffed, and Other Things I've Learned. His growing control over writing and directing did create real tension with castmates who felt sidelined, but it also drove the show's most celebrated achievement, the record-breaking series finale that remains one of the most-watched television broadcasts in American history. Alda's per-episode salary grew from a modest starting figure into one of the highest in television by the finale, and combined with syndication and creative royalties, his total earnings from the role are widely regarded as among the largest of any television actor of his generation. He has continued working for decades since in film, television, and science broadcasting, hosting Scientific American Frontiers for more than a decade, authoring multiple best-selling books on communication and science, and appearing in acclaimed roles including a multi-season arc on The West Wing. His financial trajectory reflects not just a successful acting career but a genuinely rare hybrid career as writer, director, producer, and public educator, and he remains one of the wealthiest and most respected members of the entire cast. What strikes you most, looking back across all of these careers, is how differently the same